At the heart of gaming for all of us is the desire to have some other type of transformative experience, whether it is a feeling of chasing after victory points or a conquest of another player in some way, or whether it is a puzzle and just bringing yourself mentally to a place where you're tinkering with tons of moving parts, literal or figurative, and trying to attain a goal, or whether it is entering another world and having a story unfold. And usually for me, that is the impetus behind pulling a game off the shelf. That's what I want to do. I want to experience a story in another way. I want to be transported somewhere and have some type of goal to attain. I tend toward cooperative games when playing with others, and of course, solo gaming. And what we're going to be talking about here is the third in a trilogy of adventure games that Ken Kennedy has designed, which I think for me has been, if I look back over the past 5+ years, some of the most successful games in transporting me to another place and putting me in another mental state. The one we're looking at today is called The Adventurer, and it is a fantasy adventure game called, I guess, in the Dungeons and Drifter series now. I have previously looked at his other two games in this series, Star Drifter and the first one, The Drifter, which was a Wild West adventure. And in a sense, this Wild West adventure was the one that set a very high bar for me personally as a gamer, and I think for gamers in general, to transport somebody into a setting. I'm not a Wild West type of person. It doesn't really interest me thematically in movies or novels or gaming. But there was something about this game, and you can look back at the video that I did on it to see exactly what it was that drew me in. And I talked about the ways in which the mechanics of this system were so successful. And then came Star Drifter. And in a sense here, this is a science fiction adventure game, and you are alone in a universe and traveling through and managing your resources and trying to attain large and small goals. This, I felt, was almost more successful than The Drifter because the theme of just kind of being alone and traveling in space worked so well with the system. And then we come to The Adventurer, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. The Adventurer, as mentioned, it's a fantasy adventure game. And in this game, you portray a single character, as you do in all of the games, traveling through a world, and this is your world, your map. You have a simple, or at least a clear goal of obtaining 500 gold, and I would say this entire game is a nod toward the Barbarian Prince game. If you're familiar with that, we'll take a look here at the credits for this game. You play a character with a number of different attributes. You have physicality and intellect, and you have a number of hero points that will allow you to do various rerolls, and you will be rolling on various tables depending on the current state of, for example, your aura shield, to get events that are in most of this booklet are various events that will occur, and you will, based on the status of your current shield, be in a situation that tends to have more or less conflict, and you will go to that event and you will deal with that event. It could be an encounter with somebody that lives in the world. It could be a combat. It could be a discovery. It could be some other type of environmental event. You will deal with it and then you'll move on. So in that sense, it's very much like a choose your own adventure type of book. If you have watched this channel with any consistency, you know I don't like choose your own adventure books. I find reading a whole paragraph and then getting to a couple die rolling and making a decision boring. It doesn't work for me. I've never resonated with those, even though when I was a kid and I first found one, I was like so excited. But they've always fallen flat for me. And over the years, people have modified this system and come to my email with an invitation for me to explore their game. And I always decline because it's just not my thing. However, here it's that structure, but not exactly that thing. And it very much works because, first of all, there's very little narrative. And I don't want to provide spoilers for this video. So this is why you're not going to see really too much or any of the game. But what you're doing here with the events that you roll on is you really have to bring your own narrative to that. We're going to get back and we'll look at these optional characters. But there's one thing that I want to point out, which I think is kind of at the heart of what makes this game sort of work. And that is right here, we can see that there's this little section here. It says motivation. The reason for your character seeking adventure is entirely up to you. Motivation has no impact on any of the mechanics of the game. It's to provide some initial depth to your narrative. You may make up your own motivation, choose one of the motivations below, or determine it randomly. When I played a wizard, and my motivation was recruitment. I did it randomly. And right away, that made me start to think about why would a wizard be recruiting people? What does that actually mean? And then as the events occurred, I laid over the event this concept of what my motivation was. And as such, I was able to create the story that came out of that. So for example, if I went somewhere and encountered an enemy, what would be my motivation? I encountered, for example, a cultist early on. And so I had my own story about why I was fighting this cultist as a wizard, as opposed to just playing a wizard character that has an enemy encounter. Why would a wizard start fighting immediately? Probably wouldn't. But in this way, because I was working with my own motivation, and that's providing the depth to the narrative, it worked out. And I jotted down a little bit, a sentence or two about why that we would be having that encounter, and then moved on. And so I sort of continued that throughout all the unfolding events. And ditto when I went, for example, to a city. So there are cities in this world, and you can attempt to travel to them. Remember that the larger goal is to just obtain gold to sort of win the game. And you have cities, you're placed randomly initially, and there are cities here. And so I knew that I wanted to initially go to a city, and I wanted to do various things there, visit a tavern, visit an inn, because I ultimately wanted to encounter the world in such a way that would give me the best opportunity to gain gold. And as a wizard, this was going to be in the city. And this is just one of the main actions that you will have. The combat, again, as mentioned, what will impact the amount of combat you see and the type of combat you have is the position of this aura I think it's called aura in the world. So it says your aura shield determines the negative presence reputation of your character and that it has with others, whatever makes sense to you narratively. The higher you have, the more possibility for negative attention. In game terms, it is used to determine which column you roll under when determining the random event. And we saw that here in the tables. Just quickly look again. So these are the various tables that you roll under, or the columns that you roll under. And your aura goes up or down depending on the event. So the higher it is, again, the more negative, and the lower it is, the more positive. And it suggests if you want an easier way and just sort of to travel through the game world, you start with a lower attention. Now, you may not be able to control that depending on the events and how they happen. And so you are moving around and interacting. You have control over where you go. You don't necessarily have control over the random events as they occur. There are other things aside from combat. There are skill tests that may be happening where you are attempting to achieve a goal, and you may have a penalty or a benefit for doing that particular skill test depending on where you are on the table. You can encounter people that become companions to you. You have a maximum of 2 of them, and so on. And the adventure will begin with your awakening in the wilderness. You will roll to find a random place that you are on the map, and you will gather your supplies and you'll start to go and just basically continue essentially rolling and moving and dealing with the events as they occur. Now, I don't want to, let's just take a look at the back here. Again, it is, I guess I didn't specifically state this, it's a solitaire game. You have, the book walks you through a series of events that are different each time you play. You, as a fledgling adventurer, will wander a fabled land, battling savage beasts, meeting mysterious strangers, traversing ancient ruins, and exploring forgotten dungeons in hopes of completing your quest. An endless combination of story possibilities in an exciting world of fantasy and adventure awaits. I will say the replayability on this, although I've only played through once right now, is pretty high because, first of all, there's a ton of events. Second of all, you have different characters with different abilities, and as you attain experience, you then get to add in your abilities, and they're very thematic. So the characters themselves are pretty standard fantasy tropes. You have a warrior, a wizard, a ranger, a monk, a rogue, a cleric. I thought I was going to play the monk the first time, but I actually went with a wizard. I'm going to go out now with the monk. With a rogue the second time. I think the rogue is is a good character for sort of overall, I don't know, just has a little of stuff. Ranger, monk, cleric, rogue, wizard. So you have a number of different characters. And then now we'll just take a look at a couple of things to show you what you could encounter. So in this particular situation, there are things that will happen where you have a choice. Like you'll hear, for example, in this case, there's some distressed lady. Do you want to help her? If you do, go to E167, and then this is what happens. So you, in this particular case, you're rolling a D6, and depending on what you get, you'll have a different type of interaction with her. If you want to really read this, you can pause on the page and do so. I'm not going to go through it. Again, I'm trying to minimal spoilers here. In other cases, it won't be a choice like that. It will be like you see a cave. Well, I guess you'll have a choice. If you want to go into the cave, you go to this event. If you don't, you go somewhere else. And so that is the extent of the narrative here. We'll see one more thing. So for example, here you would meet up with a jeweler. And if you want to sell your jewels, you can roll a D10. So again, there's randomness because maybe your jewels are worthless. But in that case, your aura shield is going to go down by 1. But then you're going to be stopped by a city guard, and you'll have to deal with that and go to event E8. Or you're going to sell, and luckily you get money, good quality. You get 15 gold for that. Again, you're trying to get gold as the outcome of this game. You can choose different, a little bit higher goal victory condition. So you can choose, the standard is 500 gold, or you could do a campaign to accumulate as much gold as you can until your character dies. So even if you get the 500, you don't necessarily win, you keep playing, or just high score. So you could get a high score and a certain level for that total points and then play again against your own score. So a few different ways to play, and definitely a lot of replayability when you think about all the not just the different events that there are in the game, but the fact that depending on where your aura shield is, when you interact with that event, different things may happen. So there are just many, many combinations of things in the game. And I would say thematically, the fantasy version of this is the most up my alley. It is super successful at making you feel like you're a lone adventurer in an almost sandbox world. I mean, obviously that's an illusion. It's not completely, it's not infinite, and obviously it's not even infinite in choices. You're usually rolling a d6 or a d10 for options. But because of the successful game design and mechanics, it gives you the feeling of wandering and being absorbed in a world and out in the wilderness and desperately trying to make decisions that will get you to that 500 gold that you need to win the game. So that's I think, the final version of this game in the trilogy that also includes Star Drifter, sci-fi, and began with The Drifter, Wild West Adventure. All of these by Ken Kennedy, and I can't recommend it highly enough if you like an unfolding adventure story where you have some degree of control and choice in terms of where you're going and how you're going to attain your goal, but there is a fair amount of luck involved in terms of what you get when you roll the die, and that is just part of the game. It's one where there's more luck than strategy, but the unfolding story, I think, is very successfully done. And for a game, a paragraph driven, event driven game, there is a lot of replay value.